Right, so we've got the wellies on, we've got the posh binoculars, and we're off out there. We haven't had any rain for a long time, so it's going to be wet, but it shouldn't be too bad. Right, I'll switch back on in a minute. Last time we came here, I came in through the undergrowth, and it was above me. It was really, really tall. But I'm here for two reasons, and I'll pick. I mean, last time we came here, there were butterflies, there were dragonflies. It's the middle of winter at the moment, so I don't expect to see any wildlife to film. Highly unlikely. But I have come here for a specific reason, and I'll turn the camera back on when I get somewhere near it. Oh, I love this stuff in the winter time. It turns almost white. I think it's a type of sphagnum, or it's a lichen, but whatever it is, it seems to show up in the winter. It doesn't seem to be there in the summer. Maybe it goes green in the summer, and you know, it's not so obvious. But you only tend to find it in acidic areas, normally in amongst heather, and you tend to find the heather in the acidic areas, so yeah, that's the way it goes. There's a little panoramic shot for Insa, specifically for Insa, who was out looking for little pine bonsai. You could knock yourself out round here, couldn't you? Although in Insa's book, a lot of these would be too big, but they'll all get pulled out soon because they want this to stay as heathland with wet areas. It's a wildlife haven, basically. Nobody ever comes here. Over the other side of that hill, and the next hill along, there's an area that's full of dog walkers, but they don't seem to come this far, and even if they did, they probably wouldn't come down the hill because it's obviously wet down here. This is welly boots territory, although at the moment it's quite dry. In fact, it's very dry. But the sunken pathways fill up with water in the winter, and obviously they overflow when they get full, and then the surrounding areas get wet. I mean, I'm soggy underfoot here, but not bad enough that I can't go where I want to go. So yeah, it's a nice habitat. I like it, but as I say, it's a bit devoid of any wildlife at the moment. Still, at least the sun's out. Yay! Blue sky and sunshine. What more can you ask for? Now you can see why this area holds water. When the top's worn away by, well, it's a mixture of horses and cyclists and probably trials bikes and things like that, underneath is solid clay. That's real clammy clay as well. You get that on your boots, it stays there. It takes a hell of a lot to clean it off as well. But yeah, I mean, when we were kids, we used to make stuff out of that. Little modellers of things, little dinosaurs and stuff. Yeah. So anyway, underneath the topsoil, which is quite thin and poor, is clay. Once it's exposed, you can see why everywhere's wet. You get habitats like this. Very few, not much variety in the plant life. I mean, there's a buzzard over there. Well, you probably won't see that. It's a long way away. But most of the pines you see here are Scots pine, and in amongst them are a few long-needled pines. The exact species I'm not quite sure. But why I stopped here is, what on earth is it? Insia know what that is, but that is not a pine. That is something entirely different. And I don't know what that is. Oh well. How did it get here as well? There's no large trees around for that to have seeded from. It's a bird poo job, I suppose, but yeah, a different type of tree. Yeah, so you know, the variety here is very thin pickings. You've got some gorse, don't find bramble, don't find bracken. You've got to get right over into the hill, the dry area, before you start getting bracken. There's some rhododendrons. They shouldn't be in this country anyway. They were introduced, and in some places they've become so invasive they've had to get diggers to get right down in under the roots and shift them, because they just become so dense nothing else will grow. So yeah, where's the buzzard gone? Oh, it's gone down now. And if you remember me talking about coming to get some silver sand, well, I ended up buying some aquarium stuff. This was for my pinguiculars. Well, this was the silver sand I was on about. It lives in this area, and it's quite gritty, but water goes straight through it. That's really what I wanted. So now I know where there is some. We have some bags in our pocket for an entirely different reason, but as I've found the flipping stuff, and I didn't know this was here, this wasn't where I was going to come to collect some. As I've got some bags in my pockets, we'll have some of this, I think, while we're here. Yeah, this whole path is silver sand. Good stuff. That's not why I'm here anyway. So the next question is, was it worth the climb? I'm nosy. I wanted to know what was this side of that hill. I've done that side. I wanted to know what was up here. Quite honestly, it's more of the same, except that when you get over there, that's deciduous woodland, but then that's right alongside the road, so that's not worth exploring, quite honestly. But you can see the Scots pine are taking over here. You know, 10 years time this will be back to woodland if they're not careful. So the management gets slipped on the ground when the money's tight. But this sort of thing is normally done by volunteers. You know, people just come up here and they just leave them. They just pull them out of the ground or cut them off at ground level and just leave them where they are. They die down, rot down. But it leaves the heathland open and stops it getting all clogged up. You know, you can see what's happening. You know, the density gets such that eventually the heather can't grow because it's shaded out, and that's it, it's gone. But yeah, so we've come over the top of the hill and quite honestly it's just more of the same. So right, I haven't actually found what I came for yet. Right, let's go and get some of that sand while I'm here, and then we'll try and find some of the stuff I did come for, which probably means getting wet, or getting me welly boots wet. That's why I put them on. And I'm just checking the wind direction because I don't like the colour of that sky on the horizon. So where are we blowing from and to? It's coming from over here. So that's just going that way. So it's nothing to do with me. Oh goody. Okay, who's got good memory then? Does anybody remember visiting this path and why? It was back in the summer when we had all those nice blue butterflies everywhere. And so I'm walking carefully because this is wet clay, which has a habit of putting you over on your backside. Worse than ice, that flipping stuff. Right, now all I've got to do is jog my memory. And my memory says down a bit more. Oof. Break your neck, why don't you? Aha! Oof. So who remembers this tree then? This tree is going to be in a pot in my garden later in the year. Not just yet, it's a bit too early to move it yet. You need to, conifers transplant best when the sap's rising. So you sort of watch for the buds to move, and as soon as they move, it basically means that not so much as deciduous trees, or nowhere near as much, but some of the goodness in the tree will sink down in the winter because they slow right down. They don't stop growing unless you get bitter cold weather. They tick over. So they're hardy beasts. But basically, come the spring with the longer days and everything, you're triggering the growth, same as with our orchids and stuff, and the tree will start to move. And that's the time to disturb the roots, because most of the stuff's on the way up, and the new root growth will start accordingly. But yeah, I think that's gonna make quite a nice bonsai. It's got a good solid trunk. It's got a straight bit here, but I don't think that's too straight that I can't bend it. And the chances are I will actually make a new lead, probably this one. So basically you put some shape into the trunk, cut the trunk off here and pull this up to become the new top of the tree, and just take the top off. And that emphasises the taper, that makes the taper look better. But we've got a couple of low branches down here. That's not bad. Most of the trees that are in this area that have been here a while, they've got no branches at the base. They've got nothing to work with. So they're not good for the sort of bonsai that I want. They'd be good for the literati style that you've possibly heard me mention, which is a strange style. It's basically a wispy trunk, not too much taper, that's misshapen, and then all of the growth is near the top, and it's often bent over, arched right over, so that it comes sort of part way back down the trunk. It's a strange concept, and it looks like it's really easy to do till you try it, and then you have miserable failures. It's not easy to do, but yeah, I mean, in this swampy area, the trees are stunted because they've got no nutrients, you know, so that's how they grow. You know, you can see the difference there. That's probably two different types of pine. In fact, that's the longer needled one that I was on about. Yeah, you can see the needles are much longer, and then you get the stunted ones like that, you know. But yeah, there's some useful pickings here. You've got to be selective though, you know. Very selective, quite honestly, 'cause there's a lot of stuff here that just wouldn't work for bonsai. It's just wrong. But that one back on the path there, we will return probably end of March, something like that, when things start to move, and maybe middle of March. We'll see how it goes. It depends on how the weather is during that period. I mean, if we get a snap cold, you know, we could even get snow. So if it turns really cold over a prolonged period, then that's not the time to start moving trees, quite honestly. Anyway, that's still not what I came here for, and unfortunately what I came here for I'm not going to find here. We're going to have to go back across the road, I'm afraid. Alright, I'll shut down till then. And just occasionally, for some shade and a slightly different habitat, they'll leave a few trees, often a clump, to grow on. I mean, I'm no good at judging height, but they're quite tall, and obviously along the roadside you get some tall ones. That's just going to be a silhouette, you won't be able to see that. But most of these pines won't grow like they should, because they're always striving for the light, and all the branches in the deeper shade just die back, so you end up with like a lollipop, you know, with the bit with the needles on sticking out the top, and everything else just dies back. And one of the main culprits is the silver birch, or tree weeds as they're called. But they're colonisers, you know, they will just colonise any spare area. And if you look around here, you can see a lot of them must have been cleared. There's an area over there where they haven't been cleared, and there's a few been left here to grow on. But that's what happens if you leave them. they just turn into a very, very dense but deciduous woodland. So, yeah, but they just swamp everything else out. They outgrow things. Right, now I've got to cross this busy road and hope there's somewhere to walk that's not on the road, because I don't like walking on roads, you know, where there's speeding traffic, because it catches them out. They don't expect to find pedestrians here. Right, let's go and see what we can do. Now, this is the bit that I've never filmed before, because there's things in the way. The track that I use is over there where the tall trees are. That's where I'm going. But because of the way the land lies, we never get to see the lakes, or large ponds, whatever you want to call them. And you know, again, it's a habitat for wildlife. We do get some waders come in here, some ducks. You know, it's a nice sheltered place for them to come. You've got the reed beds and the edges. You know, there's places for birds to nest and things. And you wouldn't know this was here, because you wouldn't be here normally, because to get here is dodgy because of the deep holes. I mean, this just looks like a shallow pond with bits of grass sticking out. These are deep. These are deep water. Dodgy if you don't know and you get you get somewhere where you shouldn't be and you go down out of sight. Not good. But yeah, that's the bit we don't normally see. Right, onwards. Pretty sure a long time ago this area here was planted up for timber. Not a massive area, but enough to make it worthwhile. And I think they've just forgotten about it. But, you know, obviously you can see that the type of pine this is just goes dead straight and tall. Brilliant for making telegraph poles. But these are tall trees, very tall. And there's some little birds floating around in the very tops of the trees, which there's no way I can identify them, because they're silhouetted. But yeah, so this area is this is mixed. So you know, there's some deciduous trees in amongst here. There's different types of conifers. There's Scott pine in here. That's the one with the red trunk towards the top. They colour up as they get near the top, so they're quite distinctive. And then the ones that aren't are the type that were planted for timber. And then we've got some of this sort of thing, whatever the hell that is. You can tell I'm not a tree expert, can't you? Whatever that is. I don't know, is that a juniper or something like that? Whoops, fall back down in the ditch, why don't you? Not sure. If it was a juniper, I'd have thought there were berries on it, but these are not mature trees. The brambles have got me now. Teach me to go off the path, won't it? Ugh. Yeah, so there's various types of trees here. There's an oak. It's struggling, as it's below the conifers, so that's going to struggle to get light. You know, it'll never mature into a huge big oak without the light. But, yeah, there's an assortment. Some more of these, whatever that is. That's not the same as the one we've just looked at. That much I know, but I still don't know what it is. But yeah, so there is a variety of conifers. They're not all the same. And now I've seen when that type of tree is allowed to grow on its own, that weeping habit takes over the whole tree. They're absolutely spectacular. But when they're crowded in like this, it doesn't work. But you can see what I'm getting at, the way it does that and the branches hang down. They're spectacular if they're allowed to be field grown, you know, where they've got the space. But not in a crowded woodland like this. And they do drop seeds and grow little trees. There's lots of seedlings in amongst the undergrowth. Some are even out on the side of the road here. So yeah, they do self-seed. But yes. There's a clue as to why I've come out. That's what I'm after, some more moss. But I need to get it from certain places. What I'm after is where some of the larger trees have been cut down. The moss usually takes over the top and it lifts off very easily. Trees like this and the surrounding area. There's even some little seedlings have got a hold on top of the trunk. But yeah, I'll try and find some that's out in the open a bit, because then it won't be covered in pine needles. So I'll carry on looking. But you know, you do get, when I was on about seedlings, the seedlings can take over. If you look at this area here, all this here is self-seeded. Now look what it turns into. It's a very dark place. Very dark place. And that's why I say every now and again they come in here and they take down some of the larger trees to let the light back in. I mean, look at that one. Absolutely stunning. Absolutely stunning. And they'll probably take that one out. Think how much light would come in if that one went missing. But this lot, you know, it just turns into that sort of forest eventually, which is quite honestly, that sort of forest is not very good for wildlife. The thing it is good for is for deer to tuck down in during the daytime and have their sleep, you know, their quiet time, because they won't get disturbed in there. But apart from that, it's not much good for anything else. There's very few birds nest in those types of trees, very few. So, yeah, strange habitat. Anyway, I got a hunt on. This is one of the types of moss I'm after, but I wouldn't take something like that because it's only just hanging on there. There'll be places where there's great big clumps of it, and a handful from the edges won't make any difference. But yeah, that's a different type yet again. And there's some more of that. I have managed to find a larger area with some of that, so I've got some of that. And come on. And we've also got some over there as well. And look what I found. That's about as close to the Welsh moss as I've ever come across in this country, and there's stacks of it now I've found it. And it's quite near the track as well. Oh, it looks like somebody's had a handful out of there. Anyway, I'm done now, so I'm off back home. We'll have a look at what I've collected when I get back home. So, only it's clouding over, the sun's gone, and I've got a horrible feeling we might get some rain. And I don't want to be out in the rain. So, yeah. Let's get home and see what we've got. Now, I don't know how I've missed this before. Perhaps I didn't come this far down the track. But this coarse moss, there's loads of it. And as I said, it's very like the Welsh moss, like a mini version of it. But it's got the same sort of structure. Doesn't look like it would compact. Plenty of air. So yeah. Yeah, so I found there's 3 distinct types of moss here. Well, there's 4 actually, because there's the sort that grows tight on the wood that won't come off. And there's also cushion moss, or something like cushion moss, that I haven't found much of. It's usually around the base of trees. It's a very deep green and forms little humps. Quite honestly, it's not much good for what I want, so I don't bother seeking it out. But yeah, you'd be surprised how many different types of moss there are. They've probably all got names as well, but I don't need to know. Right, so back on the track. I've just said hello to 3 enormous dogs. Oh, they're too far up the track now. come bounding up to say hello. Anyway, off back to the car now, and we'll see what we've got when we get home. I just hope I've got a tray to put it in. I might end up the non-Welsh moss that I've got at the moment, I might end up dumping, only it's old now, and it's lost its green. It's you know, it's not as good as it was once. It's dried out a few times, which doesn't help. So we may just start again and put the new stuff in there. Anyway, I can feel dampness in the air, so I'm going to get a bit of a spurt on and get back to the car, because I really do not want to get wet. Right, that'll do for now. Okay, just a quick look at what I've got in my travels. Because I had more than one bag, I did bring some of the silver sand home. It's not a lot, but I don't need a lot. It's a mix to go in with my, what do you call it, pinguicula, you know, which is a peat-based mix with grit, lots of grit, and some of this. So the grit I got from an aquarium shop, and I've now got the sand that if I'd got that, I probably wouldn't have got the other stuff, the grit. So that can just be put somewhere out the way for now, until I do the pinguiculars. And then a bag of moss. And this bit is quite impressive, because that is incredibly close to the Welsh moss. Sort of like Welsh moss minor. But it's lovely and coarse, so that's not going to compact. So that was one type I got. I've got a few handfuls of that. So I'm just plonking this in a tray, sort of any old how at the moment. I'm trying to get some of the twigs out while we're at it. It doesn't need to be cleaned now. It can be cleaned, you know, when it comes to be used. You know, you just pick up the amount you want and pick the sticks out. And, what's left is for the mount, or chopped up in the pot, or whatever you're going to do with it. Right, so that's the Welsh moss minor. That's what I'm going to call that. It's got a nickname now. And then we've got some fluffy moss. And this is not as fine as some of the other moss that I've got, but not as coarse as the moss I've just shown you. I call this fluffy moss because it does appear to be fluffy. Yeah? It's not the best moss on the mounts, but it does work. I didn't get too much of that because, quite honestly, it's getting a bit thin on the ground there. I don't know whether it's because we've had such a dry winter. And then the last sort is what I call the tight moss. Yeah, so it's like a platform. Yeah, very, very tight, and like that on the back. So it's very good for putting on mounts tight, and roots will get down in there and attach to the mount. And you would use that sort of moss for fine rooted orchids. It's also very good to put on the top of a pot to help hold the moisture in, because it is compact, if you see what I mean. So it actually does what it says on the tin and doesn't let the moisture evaporate out. I'm going to get all this in one tray. Now let me rearrange that phrase. I'm going to get all this in one tray. It's going to go into by hook or by crook. It's going in there. It's no good piling it on top of each other. It won't. You know, the bit that's underneath won't live. Some more fluffy stuff you can tuck down the side there. That's it. It's just scrappy bits left in there now. Put those sticks in there as well. Right, so all that's left to do with that is add water. Just add water. Right, so we've got our coarse moss, we've got our fluffy moss, and we've got our sort of platform moss. And 3 different uses there. The coarse moss will be for the larger structured roots, you know, things that need plenty of air around. That would be suitable for cattleyas.
and the large rooted dendrobiums, things like that. And then the next one down, the fluffy moss, is for things that need moisture for a bit longer, because obviously that will hold its moisture a bit longer because it's finer, more compact. And then the last sort, the platform moss, is really for the small rooted orchids. That makes a good platform for a Tolumnia to sit on, you know, with just a small amount of the roots underneath that, and that'll keep that plant moist, but not soaking wet. And then the other, as the roots grow, they'll go onto the mount. So there we go. And then we need some water, don't we? These are like seed trays, but they're not. They haven't got any holes in. I just fill that up until I can just sort of see it down through the moss. Don't need flooding. No. Like that. And that water level will go down quite quickly because this we haven't had rain. This moss is actually quite dry. So that will soak up. But, some people actually put their moss on something, like put it on some peat or some potting compost or something, but I find as long as the tray never dries out completely, the moss is quite happy sitting in a little bit of water. And then that's over there where my hanging racks are. One of the hanging racks has got 3 trays underneath it, and the other one's only got 2, so I have to keep swapping one around when I water the mount so that there's somewhere to drip. Now we've got this, so that's the 3rd one. So there we go, a trip out. Quite enjoyable till the sun went in, and then it became very apparent that it was quite windy and it's winter time. It started to get cold quite quickly. Not freezing cold, I had a warm coat on anyway, but so not freezing cold, but with that little bit of a wind chill, I'd say we were down to about 5-6 degrees, something like that, which is not enough for me to start panicking, not by a long shot. Needs to have a negative sign in front of it and the C on the end of it before I start panicking. And quite honestly, if it was that cold, I wouldn't have gone out because the ground would have been frozen and the moss would have been frozen, so there'd have been no point. Yeah, so there we go, first trip out this year. I wouldn't call it a field trip because we didn't go in search of orchids or anything special, but it was just nice to get out, get some fresh air, blow some cobwebs out, and job done. Oh, I'll add on the end as well, I went to see the neighbour about the hedge, and surprisingly the house is not the one I thought it was. The house that's next door is not the one that is here. That house over there has got a hedge down through it which I couldn't see. So the house that belongs to this bit of the garden is right over there. It's actually back on the main road, and it's a lovely cottage, lovely sort of cottage with a thatched roof. Lovely, lovely house. Anyway, nice lady answered the door, took me down the bottom of the garden, which is where the hedge was, and I discussed what I wanted to do. She said, yeah, that's fine. And she asked me about the, let me get the camera off because you can't see what I'm talking about, can you? Seasick time. Right, so that's the bottom of her garden basically. You can just see the white cottage in the distance there through the undergrowth. Can I get a... No. Anyway, she's fine with that cutting back to the boundary. She's quite happy with that. And what she said is that big tree there, which is a conifer of some sort, she said when she had some men round to do some heavier stuff, she asked them to do that tree. And they said they can't because it's in the next door's property, and it is. It's in this property, so it belongs in this garden. And I've said, if you want to take those branches back to nearer the trunk and let a lot more light in, then knock yourself out, because you'd be doing me a favour as well, because that would let the morning sun through in that area, so a bit more sun would get into the garden. It's not going to get on the conservatory, don't panic. It would just brighten up the garden a bit. So maybe the neighbour will do that tree, because I can't get up there and do it. I'm not climbing up the top of trees hacking around with a saw. So anyway, yeah, I found the neighbour that goes with the hedge, and that's not a problem. It's not a now thing, you know, it's sometime Hannah will give me a hand, and then we'll get out there and hack it all down and saw it up into pieces and bag it up to get rid of, and then we'll sort the wisteria out, because the wisteria is in this garden, so that does belong to me, and it looks like it's been left a couple of years and not been pruned, so the chances are you might not get a good blooming this year. I don't know. I mean, Martin left a comment in the under one of the videos about how to prune that. It's a twice a year job, depending on how vigorous it is and that sort of stuff. But all these long dangly bits could do with cutting back to nearer the trunk, and then they will shoot out quite vigorously. And then after it's bloomed, if it does, or after the blooming season if it doesn't, then the new long shoots get cut back as well, ready for the following year. Then it'll bloom. So I've got my instructions. Anyway, thanks for dropping by. Something a bit different, and I'll see you next time.